Healing after betrayal doesn't require an apology. It doesn't mean just getting over it. And it definitely doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity to save the relationship. Trying to rebuild life after infidelity without a clear process is like trying to run a marathon on a broken leg. You won't get past the start line. I'm Luke, and over the next few minutes I'm going to show you how hundreds have healed from infidelity in less than 12 weeks, with as little as 20 minutes per day, without begging for closure, without forcing forgiveness, and without losing their self-respect. I know to some that might sound impossible, and I get it. I've been exactly where you are, broken, confused, skeptical of anyone who claims to have the answers. Look, I'm not here to sell you a miracle. I'm here to show you what's actually working for real people, just like you. And by the end, I'll make a simple invitation. If you want support, me in your corner, and a community that truly understands you and what you're going through, you'll know exactly how to take the next step. And look, even if we never speak, my hope is that this gives you something real. It provides clarity, it offers tools, and a sense that healing is not only possible, it's probably closer than you think. But before we get into that, I want to start by really making sure that this is right for you, because I don't want to waste your time. So let's start looking at who this is not for. This is not for you if you are less than 4 weeks since discovery. Look, you need space to process. And often in those first few weeks, it can be extremely difficult. Maybe you're finding yourself not sleeping properly, maybe even struggling to eat properly. These foundations need to be put in place. This program is really intended for those a little later on in the journey, but I promise that that time will come for you. It's also not for people who are just seeking marriage counselling. Look, the rebuilding of your relationship is definitely possible. There's no question about that. But this is about the individual journey. This is about you and putting you first. I also understand that there's a temptation to want this problem just to go away, just like that. And I promise you, if I had a magic pill for which I could just send in the post that would solve this problem for you, I would. But that just isn't the case. So we are not going to be making any momentary, instantaneous fixes here. We're going to put intention into this process. This is about building real, lasting change from within. So now let's look at who this is for. So this is for you if you are a betrayed spouse and you are at least 2 months post-discovery. You've been through that deep shock and disbelief stage, and now you're trying to make sense of your situation. You know that this is not sustainable in the long term, and you want to do something about it. This is about people who are really ready to move forward. This is also for you if you feel like you are still trapped in emotional chaos. You understand that this, as uncomfortable as it is not the place that you want to remain, and you acknowledge that. Perhaps you're still feeling overwhelmed by grief, maybe anger, plenty of confusion and uncertainty. And this is also for you if you perhaps want to hold it together for those around you. And this is not about saving your relationship for the kids. It's not about, just doing it for the family or because of what other people might think and say. But it's because you want to go through this process with dignity. You want to be able to make intentional choices that aren't always just reactive and feeling like you're a victim to your own emotions all the time. You want to focus on you. You want to heal your heart first. That's important. And that's something that really rings and resonates for you, rings true for you. You want to make decisions from a place of strength, not fear. There's a huge difference when we make a decision about something in our future. If we're making a decision just to get away from something because we're so terrified of it, then it often leads to irrational choices. Whereas if we're being very intentional about what it is that we want, and then we're putting the steps in place to achieve that, then the sky's the limit. There's nothing that we can't make happen for us. This is also for you if you have perhaps tried traditional routes, traditional therapy, counselling. Maybe you've spent lots of time consuming blogs, books, podcasts, and you've become this passive consumer of content. In fact, you're probably becoming a bit of an expert in infidelity. But that's not what you want. Unless you want to be sat where I am, you want to be moving through this. And one of the key differences is about the implementation of things that you're learning. So let's take some of that, let's combine it with structure, and let's move forward with it. Because if you're anything like me, when I was going through this process, I didn't want, my entire Instagram feed to be full of infidelity recovery content, because that's all I would look. And trust me, the algorithms, they know. So if you've said yes to one or more of the previous slides, then I can assure you that this is for you. Now, you might be wondering how or why this is even possible. Well, first of all, I can assure you that it is possible. I have plenty of evidence, plenty of people who've been through this process to prove that. So I've seen it happen before. I've lived it. You are not alone. Healing doesn't mean fixed overnight. It means progress, but with intention. You only need small, focused steps each week. This is not about overwhelm. Our system's already being pushed to the limit. The last thing we need to do is add more on top of that. The method that I use focuses on you. It's you. You're the one that can make the difference. This is not about the relationship as a whole. It's about how you show up for yourself, which then can impact positively your relationship. It works even if your partner isn't involved or apologetic. And you'll join a community that truly gets it. There's no need to explain or justify all of your thoughts and your experiences and your feelings. It can feel terrifying. People don't get it. People have judgments. There's a lot of societal judgment about betrayal, both those who have been betrayed and the people who have done the betraying. And as much as our friends and family have our best interests at heart, this is really, they don't have the space or the understanding for the emotional experience that you have or what you're going through. Perhaps even you thought you knew what you would do if you ever were betrayed by your partner. And yet here you are, experiencing something slightly different. I know what that feels like, and you don't have to do that alone. Look, this isn't just theory. It's personal, I discovered that my wife had been unfaithful. She had an affair with a close friend of mine. And my life, it fell apart overnight. I thought I knew what the next 5 to 10 years looked like, and all of a sudden I didn't know what tomorrow looked like. Everything that I believed about my marriage, my family, my past, the future, it was just gone in an instant. And then, of course, comes the weight, that heavy weight of betrayal. Sleepless nights, waking up in the middle of the night, struggling at work, driving on the way to work and finding myself pulling over in lay-bys and crying because I couldn't handle the emotional overwhelm that I was experiencing. There was this crushing sense of grief. And then, of course, came the questions, the endless questions. Why wasn't I enough? Well, if this is something she could lie about and be dishonest about, what else might not be true? What else am I missing? How did I miss the signs? Am I stupid? Was there something wrong with me? How will I ever be able to trust again? Not just my partner, but how can I trust anybody else? How can I trust myself? What has he got that I don't? The comparison. Surely if she saw something in him, it must be something that I don't have. Maybe I'm not good enough. And the thing is, I felt those things. I carried that weight, and then I tried everything. I tried all the typical things. I replayed every detail in my head, trying to make sense of the situation. I wanted to try and piece everything together, going back through the timeline. It seemed like a logical thing to do. I sought confirmation that I was the good guy. Look, I was the betrayed spouse. I was the innocent bystander in all this. I'd done nothing wrong because it wasn't my fault, and I lived into that. I distracted myself with work, the kids. I obsessed over things that I couldn't control. I was looking at the social media content of the affair partner in the hope that I would pick up details and try and figure out and understand the situation a little bit better. I believed that if I just focused on my children, that it would just work out. Because that's the message I was getting. Just focus on the kids. Focus on the kids. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that didn't help at all, but that wasn't going to get me through this process alone. I read. I spent my time on Google. But do you know what? I always came away feeling worse. I went onto the online forums and saw people's anger and hurt. And it reinforced my own, rather than giving me the hope or the possibility that healing was possible and I could move through this and become something different. Look, I pretended I was fine, when honestly, I just wasn't. But that anger, the grief, the emotions that I was experiencing, the anxiety, the stress, the fear, the doubt, it just grew stronger. But then there was a turning point. Because one day I realised that I was just stuck in survival mode. I was just trying to make it through to the next minute, to the next hour, to the next day. And I was asking the wrong questions the whole time. Instead of really asking this, how do I fix this? I started asking, well, who am I now? And who do I want to become? What do I want this situation to mean about me? And what do I want to do with that? I started to reclaim who I was as a person. Because this wasn't just about fixing the relationship. It was about finding who I was again. It was about understanding who I was going to be after infidelity. I was learning to trust my gut. I was rebuilding my self-worth. And I was letting go of a shame that honestly was never mine to carry in the first place. I stopped surviving and I started thriving. I mean genuinely thriving. That shift from powerless to purposeful, it was like I just made this commitment to who I was. I was making this commitment to myself so that I could then grow through that process and bring it to others to help them do the same. This was me. Not long after, the beard had appeared. But things started to get better. I started to take control of my life. I used this as a catalyst for growth. And in that time, then grew and started helping people just like you. Today, as a coach, I help betrayed spouses. I quieten that chaos for them. I rebuild trust, or help them rebuild trust in themselves. And I help you make strong, but very clear and focused and intentional decisions about who you want to be. Not from a place of fear, though. It's from a place of freedom, a place of choice, a place of desire. I know this road. I've walked it. And if you feel lost, if you feel broken, if you feel stuck, I've been there. But I promise you, healing is possible. And you don't have to walk this alone anymore. This is a journey that you can go on. It's a journey you can come on together. And I'd love to be part of that with you. But this isn't just about the affair. This is about shattered trust. That you doubt everything. You doubt everything that your partner says, and even your own judgment. And then it creates this sense of like emotional whiplash, anger, grief, numbness, sometimes all in the same moment. It's overwhelming. Then, of course, there's the intrusive images. These things, it's like your brain has this ability to replay everything that it imagines happened, or maybe even the things that you have heard and discussed and witnessed or been explained to you in full high definition in your mind's eye, almost impossible to escape from, which leads to these obsessive thoughts. You can't stop thinking about the details. You're trying to piece together the whole timeline, which ultimately leads to sleepless nights because our brains never stop. It's all go, go, go. Even when your body's tired, your mind just doesn't switch off. And then we find ourselves in this comparison trap, where you're constantly comparing yourself to the other person. But there's also the deeper impact of that betrayal as well. There's the distrust that you now have of everybody. You start doubting your friends, maybe your co-workers, even the people who've never even hurt you. You feel exhausted, and it doesn't even seem like there's a reason anymore. You just feel drained and low on energy, even when you haven't done much. There's a hypervigilance that appears, constantly scanning for red flags. There's a part of our brain, the amygdala. It's like the smoke detector, and it's on constant alert. Watch out for danger. This is heightened after we've been betrayed. Then there's the emotional isolation. You feel alone, even in a room full of people. You lose that sense of self-trust. You start questioning your own judgment. How didn't I see this coming? And there's this undeniably strong sense for a need of control, or need for control, where you obsess over the details. You become a surveillance specialist, or you're just needing the answers to even feel stable at all. It's this questioning. That's where we get really stuck. Is my friend lying too? Can I trust my boss? Is anything real? This puts us in alert mode. We start to panic. Your brain's constantly scanning for that danger. You feel exhausted. You're anxious. And it's like you're never at peace. And even when nothing is happening and there is no deadline, you're still always on alert. You can't stop. You can't relax. And you're just waiting for the next bad thing to happen. Perhaps you've heard some conflicting messages. Time heals all wounds. Don't break up the family. You deserve better. Walk away. Everybody makes mistakes, don't they? That's normal. But don't let them get away with it. Think about the kids. Once a cheater, always a cheater. Have some self-respect. How do you make sense in all of this chaos? It's bad enough with all the thoughts that you have in your own mind without this additional noise that's coming from all of the sources around you, whether that be online, through friends, colleagues, or just your own internal judgment. But yet, despite all of this, you are holding it together, even though on the inside, you're drowning. I'd like to meet Sarah. She looked fine on the outside. She was successful, beautiful family, focused. She was working full time. She was managing her household. And, she was getting on pretty well with her husband. But behind the scenes, it was a glass of wine every night. She was turning to coping mechanisms that weren't helping her. She was exhausted. She loved her children, but it took everything out of her. She didn't have anything left for herself. So she disconnected from them. And during this time, she also lost a bit of weight. This was through stress. Panic attacks at work. All of these things compiled to be a situation that she couldn't even see happening at the time, but was clearly having a major impact on who she was and who she wanted to be. This is betrayal trauma. And over time, this emotional chaos, it becomes the new normal. Your brain literally rewires itself around the trauma. There's a face that you show the world, but then there's also the chaos that you're living inside. And these two things don't always align. You remain in this place of inner conflict. It's known as cognitive dissonance, where we have these two opposing beliefs, these two things that could be true at the same time. And our brain can't make sense of it. Look, time alone isn't enough. As much as we like to hear these phrases, like time is a great healer, if you or I just sit here and fold our arms and wait, exactly how much time? What will change if we just wait? Because if left, that pain just becomes chronic anxiety, often leads to deep, more in-depth lasting trust issues, and a lingering sense that you are perhaps never safe or never were, or maybe you're not whole or worthy. But healing isn't just about saving your marriage or just about getting over it. It's about finding yourself again and then reclaiming it and owning it as you. I want to introduce the chaos to clarity method. It's a proven 3-layered approach that works because it treats the whole of you, not just the relationship. The first level is the physiological sense of healing. We use body-based tools to calm the overwhelm, to restore physical safety, and to reconnect you with breath and body. Betrayal trauma overwhelms your nervous system. It instigates the fight, flight, or freeze response, which is designed to keep you safe. But that's when you're in real physical danger. But that's not what we're experiencing here. We're experiencing emotional turmoil, but our body is reacting as though our life is a threat. And then this becomes your default. Layer 2 is the psychological healing. We interrupt those loops to help you reframe your thoughts. Because you're not broken, you're looping. We break the rumination. We stop believing that every fear that your brain creates. These cognitive distortions and mental spirals, that's what keeps you stuck. And then in layer 3, we create space for your identity. This is about rediscovering who you are, what you value, and where you're heading, with or without your partner. Infidelity can feel like an identity theft, like it's been taken away from you. But in the chaos to clarity method, this isn't just about coping. It's about growing through something that you never asked for. Making decisions from power, not fear. So why does this method work? What is it that's so special about it? Well, it's because it goes beyond just straightforward crisis management. It gives you a solid structure to reclaim your life, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. The chaos to clarity method has 3 phases essential for healing. Phase 1 is stabilisation. It's at this point that we start to regulate the nervous system to help it feel more at ease. Because for healing to actually be possible, at first we need to at least feel some sense of safety. And there are ways that we can do this. We can stop that emotional dysregulation in its tracks. Start just by placing your hand on your heart and your other hand on your stomach. Take 5 slow breaths. Follow the ball on screen. In, out. In, out. This is just bringing our attention back to the things that we can control. You're focusing on something that you can manage, that nobody else can take away from you. You are owning your experience. We can also stop it by using the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding method. As you sit here, I want you to focus on 5 things that you can see. Call them out in your mind. It can be anything, from the tiniest little detail, like a speck of dust on the corner of the device that you're watching this on. It could be something that you've got in the room. Maybe it's a particular part of your skin on the back of your hand, or something you can see in the distance. Really notice them. Now I want you to find 4 things that you can touch. Now this could be something that you can reach out for and make contact with, or it could be the feeling of the clothes as they touch your skin. Maybe even feel the feeling of your feet meeting the ground and the ground pushing back up into the soles of your feet. Maybe it's the feeling of your tongue in your mouth touching the roof of your mouth or running around the backs of your teeth. Now let's turn to our sense of hearing. Find 3 things that you can hear. Maybe it's my voice. Maybe it's some background noise outside or nearby. Maybe if you become very, very still, you can even hear your own heartbeat. Now let's draw attention to your smell. Try and find 2 things that you can smell. And even if you can't physically smell something right now, imagine something that you can smell. A smell that you love. Maybe it's fresh flowers, maybe it's a particular food. Maybe it's freshly washed clothing and the smell of fabric conditioner. And then finally, 1 thing that you can taste. Again, you can use your imagination here. You can imagine a taste that you love and picture it and think about how that sits on your tongue. Or maybe it is just the taste that you have in your mouth currently. By using this simple grounding techniques, we can bring whatever we're experiencing back to the current moment. We're bringing it back to the place where we can take control. The next step is our thought separation protocol. This is understanding the different parts of our experience that are story and those that are fact. You might believe that you're not enough, but the fact is, your partner had an affair. You might believe that you must have been stupid to believe them. The fact, though, they lied to you. Perhaps you believe that they must care more about them, the other person, than they do about me. The fact is, they're probably just still in contact with the other person. It's understanding that we are faced with these facts in lives, but then our brains, they become really, really good at making up stories about what those things mean. And it's amazing how unkind we are to ourselves when we allow those thoughts to play out. We then want to take those thoughts and we want to understand the difference between what is true and what is not true. And then we can start to put actual boundaries in place. We can set these non-negotiable boundaries to protect you emotionally. That's the boundaries that you can put in place with your partner. In fact, it's even the kind of boundaries that you can put in place with your kids or your in-laws or your work colleagues or your friends. But really focusing on being clear, kind, all the time. These always come from a place of love. Boundaries are often misinterpreted as expectations, as guidelines for which other people in your life should behave. But that's not what a boundary is. A boundary is there to protect you. A boundary is your way of saying that this is what I'm going to do to protect myself if your behaviour continues in the way that it is currently doing. When we go through these stabilisation stages, it creates less anxiety. It improves our sleep, which gives us more energy and more focus. This reduces the amount of rumination that we do and creates a calm foundation for true healing. This sets us up perfectly for the rediscovery phase, which is phase 2. This is where we reclaim your identity and we reconnect with who you are as a person, your truth. Because once you feel stable, the real healing can begin. It's time to reconnect with you. And we start by making sense of what we have control of. We started that in the first stage and now we're going to implement that in some way. So we can do that by rediscovering our core values and creating a value compass. Because not just as a partner, not just as a mother or as a father or as a daughter or as a son or as a sibling or as an employee, but as you, like you as an individual, like what is important to you? What are the things that are most important in your life? And are you living in line with them? Perhaps even just as you sit here, start to think about the types of things that are really important to you. Maybe it's integrity, maybe it's dignity, maybe it's honesty, maybe it's trust, maybe it's nature, time. There are an infinite number of ones that are available, but what's important to you? And if you sit there and start to write down a few of those values, I want you to ask yourself, how aligned am I currently living with my own values? We spoke about that disconnect earlier. The disconnect where we have one part feeling this and another part feeling that. Well, it's our value compass that helps bring that back together. Because we know that even if we are faced with a difficult situation, a difficult challenge, a difficult question, then what we're going to do here is use this as our reference to know that we're making a choice from a place of intent, a place of purpose. It's something that you can move forward with. Understanding your relationship with your own values is absolutely foundational in terms of feeling a sense of inner peace. It helps reduce that inner conflict because you can have confidence in your own ability to choose what it is that you want in life. What do you want to believe? And who do you want to be? This creates this foundation for the trust building framework. Because before you can trust anybody else, it's imperative that you trust yourself. And by doing that, you need to be able to entrust your gut feeling, your intuition. and also your judgment. Because when someone has betrayed us, it makes us question our own judgment. This is not just about the trustworthiness of that individual, it's about our ability to trust or judge that individual. And when that part has been shattered, it can leave us feeling very unstable. But I promise you, it's still there. It just needs rediscovering. During this process, we can then move towards what forgiveness might look like. And I understand that can be a difficult concept to even want to consider. For some people, the idea of forgiving is perceived as impossible. Or perhaps, maybe you've rushed to forgiveness because you believe that that's what's necessary to help move through this and reconcile in your relationship. Forgiveness isn't just a binary, I forgive, I don't forgive. It's a choice. And it doesn't require pressure. This is no pressure from you and no pressure from the external. Your partner maybe feels that they need you to forgive them for them to feel okay, but that's not your responsibility. Forgiveness is you. It's what you experience. It's the weight that you're carrying. And to do that, we just need these gentle steps towards releasing the emotional burdens that you're carrying. We can start just by acknowledging the hurt and the discomfort of what you've experienced. Forgiving does not mean forgetting. It does not mean condoning or justifying. You can release that need for understanding. You are not your partner, and you did not make the choices that they made. And you don't have to understand every intricate detail to still be able to forgive and release that burden from yourself. Because ultimately you're choosing to let go for you. Rediscovery is there to help you start to feel whole again. It no longer is just about your partner or just about you as a spouse or as a parent. Instead, this is about rediscovering you as you as the individual. And then we move on to phase 3, the final phase. This is all about reconstruction. It's taking the foundational parts that we've worked on in phase 1 and 2 and creating a future that you probably can't even imagine is possible for you right now, but I promise you is. Rebuild your life, with or without the relationship. We go through the decision-making framework, understanding that actually there are no objective rights and wrongs. They're all subjective. They're ours to make. And first of all, we require the clarity and the confidence in our own thinking to be able to make those decisions and know that they align with us and what we need. They're no longer being made from a place of fear or confusion or uncertainty or pressure from our partners, which then means we can figure out how to communicate that, firstly with ourselves, but then with either our partners, or maybe we're entering into a new relationship, because there are some difficult conversations that are going to be had, particularly if we've got children, whether we're choosing to reconcile or go our separate ways. These conversations, it's difficult to be avoided. So we need to figure out how to have those conversations with our partners that aren't always going to turn into arguments and confusion and anger and frustration. Because you'll also need to have conversations with your children to help them understand on a level that is appropriate for them what's going on. So to know that this isn't about them and how you can support them through this. And I know that the temptation might be to stay for the kids. That's a common message that we hear, but you will not feel aligned if you stay for the kids. I promise you. And I know the desire is to protect our children. Of course it is. I have children. I love my children. Of course I want to protect them. But staying just for them in a relationship that might not be healthy or appropriate or right to save is not a reason. It's not a reason. There are going to be difficult conversations with your family, whether you leave or whether you stay. If you stay, it's about helping them come on board with your decision to do that, and knowing that you have made that choice from your intentional place. If you go your separate way, it's about overcoming the potential judgments that you fear you might experience and reconnecting with the people that are close to you, because having a support network in a scenario like this is essential. But also, what's really important is your ability to communicate with yourself so that you can have your own back. And that sets us up for the future vision blueprint. And this is where we can design a vision for your life moving forward. It's aligned with your values, not with your trauma. Because focusing on the things that matter, your nervous system, your thought patterns, your sense of self, that's what makes it different. That's what makes this process different, and that's what makes it so complete. I want to introduce you to some of the people that have walked this very same path and have found healing on the other side. With Charlotte, at the start, she was completely consumed by the anger and emotional turmoil that she was experiencing. But when she now, as she's put here, when she reads her early journal stage, you can see how much that she's changed. She never thought she would reach a place where she could understand. It's not about agreeing with, remember, but understand how this happened. And then that clarity has given her just a ton of peace. Then there's Fran. Fran's in a much better place than she was when she started. Again, feeling overwhelmed, not dissimilar to Charlotte, trying to juggle everything all at once. But this created a space for her where she could find the tools and process things at a pace that was appropriate to her. And the conversations that were supportive and constructive, and they were hugely important in her journey. This brings me on to Francis. Francis was really struggled with his ability to be compassionate to himself. He felt himself in negative spirals, often losing his temper, blaming things on others. The idea of really taking responsibility was a little bit alien. It didn't really make sense to him. But once he started to show himself compassion, he could really reflect on who he wanted to be as a person and how he showed up in his relationships. But he now has the confidence to move through this. And finally, there's Michelle. Michelle was like going through a situation with blinkers on. Having spent years hoping that things would change, that other people would change for her to feel better, this gave her the confidence to know that she was in control of her own journey and that the change really began with her. She can't control the other people, but she can control what she thinks and feels, and that made a huge difference to how she then showed up in her relationship going forward. And this can be you too. Whether you stay or leave, healing is possible, and you don't have to carry this pain alone anymore. Now, there are many common misconceptions, particularly out there in the online world. We've all seen the messages. Time heals all wounds. But as although time helps, it's not enough. Because without the right kind of healing, trauma just digs in deeper. And that unaddressed pain doesn't fade, it festers. What about this one? I have to forgive or reconcile to heal. But think about the dependency that's putting on. It's not true. Healing means reclaiming your power, not restoring the relationship. Forgiveness is a choice. Reconciliation is not required. It's an option. It's been months. Why aren't I over this by now? You're not broken. Betrayal trauma affects your nervous system, your identity, your ability to trust. 6 months in and still struggling? That's normal. Healing means my kids will suffer. I've already touched on this a little bit. Actually, the opposite is true. Your kids feel pain even when you try and hide it. By healing yourself, you're modelling resilience, recovery and emotional safety. You're demonstrating the kind of person that you want to be. And trust me, your kids will see that. But the truth is, healing is about you. It's about becoming the whole you again. It's about not rushing, not pretending, and not doing it for anybody else. So what comes next? Look, I'm not here to convince you. You've already survived the worst. You're here, and good for you. This is just an invitation, if it feels right. And if this spoke to you, if the Chaos to Clarity method resonated with you, if you felt something click, then maybe this is your next step. You don't have to stay stuck. There is a proven way forward, and it starts with a decision. You can DM or email me clarity. You can contact me on either of the details that are below there, either on Instagram or directly email me at lifecoachluke.com. If you're not ready yet, that's also okay. Please stick around. You can subscribe to the podcast after the affair. Follow me on Instagram and get support when you're ready. Because you are way more capable than you know. You've already made it through one of the hardest things a person can experience. And the next part, you don't have to do it alone. Healing isn't just possible, it's a gift that you get to give yourself. You deserve to reclaim the parts of yourself that betrayal tried to take. Thank you so much for being here. My name's Luke Shillings, and I'll hopefully see you soon.